Hello, welcome to another episode of the Based on a True Story. My name is Matthew Baxter.
And I'm Dr. Karen Stollznow.
And I'm Blake Smith. And we also do the Monster Talk podcast, which you can find at monstertalk.org. And I'm excited about this episode because it's a little different from our other ones in this series, because most of the other ones are around lore, specifically stating that the movies are based on a true story. But with Poltergeist, there are some very persistent legends around the idea that the movie was based on some true events. But the studio, as far as I know, has never claimed it's based on a true story. So we're going to talk a little bit about the film, its impact on paranormal culture, and some of the elements that actually are based on real things and what those real things were. And then some of the things that aren't necessarily real, but still have a persistent connection to this film.
This is definitely going to be a fun one. I'm really looking forward to it. One of the interesting things that I find about it right off is that most of the people who adore this film saw it when they were young. And for its time, it was a remarkable movie. But when you look at the extremes that movies would kind of go to try to reach a place in the audience's mind, you look at The Exorcist and how extreme that was. And then Amityville had to really ramp things up. And then we get into Poltergeist. And for some reason, the music is not like any other horror movie. The music is more like a Disney movie.
Yeah.
You know, there's lots of flutes and it's just really orchestral. And it's really kind of bizarre how there's that imbalance in a sense. But the thing is
that heightens the tension, though, because it could really have the opposite effect. But I think just with that calm music, and as opposed to the tension and the stress that you can see in the actors, I think that it's just an interesting kind of contradiction.
Yeah. It really does create this sort of a word that's not coming to my mind. And the interesting thing is like,
je ne sais quoi.
Yes, yes, a certain whatever.
Something.
The thing is you've got in those other movies, especially I have both with The Exorcist and Amityville. With Amityville, you have this sort of children's kind of little song there, and with the children's voices. And la 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 la, but it's creepy
just
as
like
hell.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like Rosemary's
No, I actually paused and played a clip. That wasn't me singing that. That was a clip from. That's how accurate it is. No, the thing is then you had The Exorcist with Tubular Bells, which heard on its own before The Exorcist was not creepy at all. It was
25 minutes or something like
that.
Yeah,
it was it was too long, is what it was. But the thing is the movies themselves made it creepy, but then they really had some dramatic music elsewhere. And I'm not saying that the music in Poltergeist wasn't dramatic, but it was just different.
It was effective.
It's kind of interesting. There's another tie-in in that the Tubular Bells was by Mike Oldfield, and we're also going to be talking about an old field. So that's kind of fun. But
it's nice how that
there
all
you go,
falls
as a
together.
Strong connection. Yeah.
So this is one of the first kind of horror movies that uses so many sort of like CG kind of effects. A lot of the effects in both Amityville and The Exorcist were practical. And these ones, there was a lot of animation and things like that. Camera
industrial.
trickery.
It's got a strong industrial light and magic feel. If you the conclusion, there's a lot of places where it feels a lot like the special effects in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and in also in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So
exactly.
A lot of the tank, they use the water tanks to like do the cloud effects and stuff. But sorry,
and it's
Karen,
not a shocker.
You're going, yeah.
Well, I guess just before we get into talking about the movie and giving an overview of the plot, I just wanted to talk about when the movie was released. And so this was around the same time as E.T. and Spielberg's other film. And E.T. I actually did watch at the cinema. I was a very small girl at the time, but I don't remember Poltergeist coming out. But it seems like it was definitely extremely popular, particularly in the United States.
It was definitely a huge movie here. And both of them were. Spielberg kind of could do no wrong, at this point.
Were they released at the same time?
They were very close.
Here?
They were very close. But
they were both up for Academy Awards for special effects. And this was also kind of an innocent time, because what's going to happen is this is 1982. So this is a 1982 movie. You get E.T. the Extraterrestrial being made, and then this movie is made. Spielberg's the producer, and film fans will be quick to tell you there's a big discussion about whether or not the listed director, Tobe Hooper, actually directed the film or whether it was really Spielberg. The films were filmed about 20 minutes apart from each other, and Spielberg kept going back and forth and had his fingers in a lot of stuff. Now,
so to speak.
I don't know if we would talk about that now or come back to it. I think maybe
we'll come back to it.
Yeah, because I have a lot of thoughts about that. I would point out, though, that one of the things that I think is kind of important is this happens in 82. In 1983, they make Twilight Zone, the movie, and Spielberg's involved in that. And there's a terrible accident on the set that kills actor Vic Morrow and then 2 child actors. And I think that changes Spielberg a lot. Like, not only does he have to go through the legal ringer about everything, but it's like the movies are not quite as fun anymore, because now you realize people can die. Like, it can be really it had a big impact, I think.
And I think that ties in too with some of the folklore connected to Poltergeist and the supposed curse that's attached to the movie. Which,
if you didn't see this as a kid, watching it, having to rewatch it as we all do for this show, I would have to say that there were a lot of things that didn't hold up, that did look hokey. But when you see it as a kid, you're able to still watch it through that lens and still have that same love for it. But someone that's never seen the movie before and sees it for the first time would probably go, I don't get the hype. Because some of the things that
about me,
I am talking, I'm talking about anyone in your shoes is what I'm talking about, because I noticed this with you, that, it's like, I've got it in my head that this is the coolest movie of all time. And as I'm watching it, I am seeing, the holes of time sort of tear away at it. And that's not a surprise, but I will say that, as long as you don't watch The Exorcist in high definition, a lot of it still holds up. A lot of it still really does, maintain.
Yeah, I think the
Changeling didn't have huge effects, so it was just beautiful all the way through. But this one, it relied so much on it that there was a lot that was like, and then I will point out some other things a little later about the disparity between, what was happening to the family and what you would expect would be happening to the family in this situation. So there was a little bit of that. But
do you think that Poltergeist is very, very much like the other movies that we've been talking about in this entire series of Based on a True Story? And I think it's very much a product of its own time. And I think when people talk about their love for a film like this, they're not only talking about the film itself, but there's everything that is around that. It's kind of like music too. You attach it to a time and a place in your childhood or your youth. And there's a lot more attached to the movie than just the movie itself. It's also just the time when you saw it and your feelings then. And there's just a lot more to it. And that's why people get so emotional about movies. And
I agree 100%.
And then to come back and see it as an adult through an adult's eyes, it can give you a different perspective.
Well, it's an 80s movie. So it's very much, Spielberg loved to do middle-class America films. And so this story is about a middle-class American family in a suburb, and they're going through like all this sort of paranormal stuff. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, that's a really great way to begin our discussion of the plot too. The way that the movie begins is absolutely focusing on that kind of middle-class America.
I mean, at the end of the film, if it weren't for all the supernatural stuff, wouldn't you just think it was a big ad for Cuesta Verde? I want to move there. So
lovely housing developments, and
as they even point out that all the houses look the same. Like he's trying to sell the houses, and they're talking about. Okay, so I guess we should back out and say this is the story of the Freeling family, Stephen and Diane and their kids, Carol Ann, Dana, and Robbie, who live in a housing development named Cuesta Verde. And Stephen is the #1 real estate salesperson for the company that has built this development in multiple phases. This is phase 1 he's living in. He's got a really lovely house. And he's a real estate salesperson. So he apparently has sold 40% of all the houses in the development. So he's helped his company make a ton of money. And and it starts off with him living in the house as, you know, he's going out to his job every day, and some strange things start to happen. It also opens very patriotically with the national anthem. So this is going to make no sense to modern audiences. Like,
our son was walking around the house doing this. But it actually starts, yes, with him asleep in front of the television screen. Now, I'm not sure if we had anything like this when I was growing up. I mean, we certainly had that kind of test pattern at the end of the evening. I mean, nowadays, television is continuous. There's always something on. But in those days, obviously, there was a time where television ended for the evening.
Yes.
So that really dates the movie, but it sets it in its place.
And it's an old, I mean, these are not digital televisions. When the signal stops, it goes to static. So a lot of the TV stations used to have a end of the broadcast day message, and some of them would leave up an advertisement overnight or a test pattern so you could adjust your television in the evening. You know, this is very nostalgic for someone of my age, I think, to think back on this time. I mean, this is really before VHS, right? I mean, like there weren't blockbusters around the place at this time. And I noticed at one point there was a shelf in the house where Diane is sitting in front of it, and I was like, "What? That's not a book." It was albums. It was like she had hundreds of albums on the shelves.
Wow,
it's a middle class.
I remember
family,
those days.
They got a really nice. I mean, this is upper middle class. I mean, to be honest, I mean, like they seem to have a lot of money.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it is certainly a very nice home for its time, and kind of Brady Bunch-like, really, I think, with the style and
even the stairway. And
so it's very disruptive from a horror movie perspective, because they open up with this all the symbolism of middle-class America, calm and, you know, prosperity. And then the little girl approaches the television. Again, everyone loves TV. And there's no signal, but yet she starts to respond to the TV as though she's being told something. I think it's a very creepy, kind of subversive approach to introducing the audience to this paranormal stuff. So
it is. And I was saying to Matt after I'd watched the movie, or halfway through, that it was a bit of a slow burner, really, with the way that the activity began. And he recalled to me that things were happening from the get-go, that the little girl comes downstairs.
You're right. It does ramp up. Yeah.
Well, it's the thing is you get that message in the beginning that she, you know, I can't hear you, you know, and she's talking to the TV, and it's kind of creepy and everything. But then suddenly it's everyday life in full force. I mean, they really demonstrate the chaos of just having a normal day. And you get so distracted by that when something crazy happens, it's really out of left field. So,
and I do think that that's interesting too. And Matt and I have talked about this a lot, that there's a lot of humor in the film, unexpected humor, and also just unexpected day-to-day events, and the kind of mundanity of that really does, I think, what's the term I'm looking for? We're doing a lot of this today, but kind of sets you at ease before. It really it's kind of sets you at ease, and then suddenly something happens and you're really not expecting it.
Right, they can't pull the rug out from under you if they don't start by putting you on a nice rug.
Yeah. I mean, you've got this really large family, and the mother things are just so hectic in the kitchen. She's trying to prepare breakfast for them, and there's a dog running around. The father's on the phone, and it just really, a lot of people, I'm sure, could relate to that too, even today, getting ready in the morning before
him on the phone and tying the tie, and he ties the tie around the phone cord, and
it's a tight script too. I mean, they're revealing to you that, you know, throughout the story, that he's been trying to become a partner in the firm, and they haven't let him in yet, and that they're going to get a pool. They really want a pool, and so that all becomes part of the story too. And wasn't it weird? Like the pool guys, were they like the creepiest pool guys ever?
Yes. They would not. There'd be so many lawsuits today.
And the way that they came onto the young daughter, and then she stands up for herself.
Well, she did, which again, but for the mom not to get out there and yell at them, she just watches her daughter. I was like, no way.
It's like, my daughter can stand up to slime bags.
She's
just reaching in and testing the sauce through the window, and
then when they're drinking her coffee, and I mean, I would have sacked them.
They would be fired. They'd be so fired in every way. They'd be fired. So, but you got to be careful, because one of them is Billy from Predator. I'm pretty sure.
I saw that.
So, you don't want to mess with Billy. He will cut you.
He's kind of a badass.
He's from Rome, Georgia, just where I was born.
So there, by association, you are also badass.
Yes, exactly. I will knife fight you on a log any day.
And wearing that bandana, I would not challenge you.
Yeah, you don't want to mess with me.
Okay, and I also wanted to point out that it was interesting how some things can happen and then it just be brushed off. Even could the death of Tweety had meant something? It was immediately brushed off when Robbie was holding that glass of milk. Well, that we don't know. I mean, it makes you feel off balance.
Well, I would
canary in the mine,
the canary in the mine. Exactly. I think it's literally supposed to be something bad's happening, and it's the canary in the coal mine. Yeah.
I see, because they never really picked that up again, except for the point where they were digging into the ground for the pool, and you see the tobacco box
pushes up.
Which is, by the way, I totally hadn't made the connection until watching it last night. The Carol Ann mentions to the mom when they're burying the bird in the box. She's like, well, this smells terrible. And you think, oh, yeah, cigars. And then the next scene, or just a minute later, you see her smoking a joint, which she's keeping in a cigar box. So there's a real chance that what she's smelling is not a cigar. Well,
exactly.
Americans stink weed, is what I'm saying. So,
living in Colorado, I picked that up.
Yeah. See, I thought where you were going with that was somewhere actually associated with the plot of the movie, that when she's saying it stinks, that maybe she was smelling the stench of all the dead bodies that were right there underneath them. But as as they're digging around.
Spoiler alert at this point.
Yeah. Sorry, I know you guys haven't seen the movie yet.
But I do think it's interesting the way that they do, as you're saying, just overlook the initial activity. For example, the little boy's sitting there having breakfast, and then suddenly a fork is bent and a spoon is bent.
And the glass of milk that breaks, and he says, "Not my mess." Completely
completely ignoring the fact that his glass just exploded in his hand. That's a very weird scene. So
all over the daughter's homework.
But speaking of ramping things up, I mean, you do get the sort of Chekhov's clown and Chekhov's tree. These future elements are going to be coming into play, but I feel like the kid, how the movie where they'll say something like, let's split up and look for clues, or let's, that kind of thing. It's like, when the kid sees the clown and covers it up every night but doesn't get rid of it, that's a bad, don't do that. Don't do that.
Or covers it up and it's Chewbacca's face looking back at it.
Yeah. So
I'd be getting rid of that clown, that's for sure.
Could they have squeezed any more product placements into this film? I mean, it's like so many Star Wars things are in here. It's amazing. So
there was a ton. I mean, the Darth Vader poster on the wall and the Chewbacca jacket. Yeah, it was really.
I didn't even really notice those things or think of them. Now that you're raising them, it's like, oh, I did see that poster. But
the C-3PO bed sheets. It was like just all over the place. But now, I mean, that's Lucas's stuff, not Spielberg's, but still, it's a lot of product placement. So but it's also probably accurate to what people would have been having in their house in 1982. So I agree.
I agree.
So what happens next is the paranormal stuff starts to ramp up, and it goes from a light beginning to literally the clouds are turmoil. A giant paranormal tornado comes through the tree. I mean, it's like so many things happen. It really goes like to 11.
I think I'd like to just mention the chairs and the kitchen.
Oh
table.
yeah. That's such a beautiful scene.
Because I think that's so fun. And as Matt pointed out when we were watching it, it was just really incredible the way that they didn't miss a beat between the chairs are pulled out at first, and the mother notices them and asks the little girl if she did that, and she denies having done it or hadn't done it. And then I think she just moves away, does something under the sink, and then comes back, and there's that formation.
There's no
of the
cut.
chairs.
It's like 11 seconds. The camera, it's like 11 seconds. They turn away, follow her into the kitchen. She turns back, and all the chairs are stacked up into a pyramid on the table. It's beautiful.
When I saw that as a kid, it shocked me so much. When I was a kid and I saw that.
Even the way that
so unexpected.
The feet of the chairs are off the table as well,
yeah.
And they're perfectly balanced. And I think it's interesting too that is so perfectly done, whereas in other parts there are some kind of sloppy cuts. I don't know if Matt wants to talk about that I didn't notice the first time that I saw it, but certainly this time being aware of them, picked them up.
Right. Well, when the father comes home and they do the floor demonstration with him, sort of the wax on, wax off on the floor there. He's sitting there against the wall, stunned. And Caroline's like, I'm hungry. And she's like, we'll go get Pizza Hut. I guess what Steven says at that point is he's sitting there stunned. He goes, I hate Pizza Hut. And they had to cut that out because Pizza Hut got angry.
You don't want to mess with the Hut.
Right.
That's true for Star Wars and for film.
And exactly.
Well, I guess Star Wars is a film, but you know what I mean. So you don't want to mess with Pizza Hut or the Hut. So Pizza.
Yeah, Jabba or pizza. So the thing is they, I guess, couldn't get everybody back in for a reshoot of that. So they just had to cut it. And suddenly he's sitting there. It's like, and then they're standing outside the neighbor's door, getting bitten by mosquitoes. And it's so awkward.
Kathleen and I discussed that. It's like, we grew up on it that way. That's the cut we saw. And it works for me. I didn't find it that jarring. Now, once it was pointed out to me, like, that is a really abrupt cut. It really
I think
is.
Having had it pointed out too, that's why it seems jarring.
I'm still fine with it. Although who doesn't love Pizza Hut? I mean, the problem is you can't get Pizza Hut like back then. If you wanted Pizza Hut, you had to go to Pizza Hut. They didn't bring anything to your door, and it was a different product. It was so cool.
I haven't had Pizza Hut in about 20 years, and so
it was a joy going there when you went.
They had an arcade machine. They had a Donkey Kong, they had a Donkey Kong. What do they call them? The cocktail table one.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I wanted to be a waitress there, now server. When I was a kid, when I was about 5. That's how much I loved it. It was such a treat to go there, even though my father would refer to it as a biscuit with topping. So biscuit being an American cookie. So he didn't like paying $20 for a pizza.
Wow.
I liked it.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I don't. I think the sauce changed and the bread changed. It used to be like a deep dish style. It was really good. Anyway, whatever. 80s.
We could go on. We could go on. But the thing is these days. Go ahead, Cameron. Sorry.
I was just going to refer back to the activity with the table and the chairs, and I do think it's interesting just how excited the mother is when the father comes home. And I think I would be concerned at this point, but I mean, she's having a fantastic time and subjecting the poor little girl to all of the phenomena and sitting her on the ground so that she slides across the floor. And I just think it's interesting how excited she is, and the rest of them are a little bit stunned.
Karen, to be fair, we didn't get to see how she got to that point because she might have spent some time in the cigar box, if you know what I mean.
True.
Yeah. That's the way she acts for most of the film, I think.
Yeah. We never see her actually at a job or anything. So that she may just be sort of a pot reviewer or something for her day job.
Croaky.
Exactly. But in terms of the that cut that was so awkward, I think today when we watch that kind of stuff, it's not as jarring because we watch so much of our content streaming, and there's buffering and there's this and that kind of issues.
True.
That we don't even attribute it to a problem with the movie. We attribute it to a problem with our connection.
But I think it is pretty subconscious unless you're aware of it. So
exactly.
I do agree with that. But I think I mean, it just, things really escalate. We go from the shares balancing, which has this kind of beauty to it. It's just very magical, to then that tree scene with the storm, and things just get very dramatic very quickly.
That seemed like more of a Jim Henson scene than it did.
It did. The tree really literally tries to eat the kid, the son. And of
he
course,
was predicting
all
that too. Yeah, that's just such a freak accident, but it's almost like the little boy's predicting it. He's very scared of that tree in those earlier scenes.
And the clown. Yeah.
And
don't forget, you remember what Tangina said. It knows what scares you. But the thing is she says, it knows what scares you. Don't give it anymore. It knows too much already. And that's certainly played out by what the boy experiences.
Yes.
It knows what scares him.
And remember, I mean,
that's a really good point.
I'm pretty sure the tree would have eaten him completely. That would have been the plan. But really, the tree is just a distraction, because what they're really trying to do is get to Carol Ann.
Yeah.
And
I think
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I think it's amazing how his nose is broken afterwards, and his face is such a mess. And then pretty much in the next scenes, he's recovered from it.
Yeah, he does keep the little scratch on his nose for I guess some of the film, but you're right. He looks way more beat up and bloodied and messed up.
Well, he's got tree goo.
There's a lot of goo in this movie. This is this is a movie about birth.
We were talking about that. Yeah.
So
ectoplasmic residue is.
We definitely will talk about that as a kind of as one of the paranormal forms of activity or phenomena that takes place in the movie, which is kind of almost at odds with the name of the movie, but we'll get into that.
We definitely need to talk about that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But what I want to mention is Carol Ann had great dialogue for a 6-year-old, and I'm just talking little things.
5. I think she said she was 5. She answered the TV.
5,
yeah,
right.
She said she tells the TV 5. Yeah.
Yep. You're right. Yeah, it says for a 5-year-old, but I mean, I'm not sure how old she was in the movie to be able to do this acting, because usually they cast people to be younger than they actually are. I.e. Jason Priestley. So
I was just going to say, casting people in 30-somethings as 20-somethings.
Right. So the thing is
she would have been 6 or 7. It looks like. So
yeah,
she looks about 5, and with her language sounds about 5.
The way she comes down the stairs 1 foot at a time. The way she kind of
Oh, she's adorable.
It's so she really acts that age so well.
That's a hell of a stairway, isn't it? I've never seen a stairway like that in the house.
No,
especially not in the 80s, but
it's totally
very
grand. And it ruins the space, really. I mean, other than in this movie, it's grand, but to have that in your house, you'd be like, what the hell is this thing doing here?
Well, Kathleen pointed out they also have a tree growing in there. They got a lot going on in there.
That is an interesting plant, that the way it's so big and so tall and kind of thin at the same time. But the staircase is really such a focal point for various points in the movie. I mean, from the little girl coming down the stairs through to the other activity that takes place.
Well, it's also a stairway to heaven, isn't it?
Yeah, or something.
Or hell.
Sorry. Or a highway to hell, either way.
I think the movie's got a lot of symbolism in it. I really do. It's like,
there's a ton. Yeah. And sometimes it's so blatant, it loses its sort of artisticness because it's so blatant sometimes.
But we should go back as well, I think, to the television and the time that is on the television.
02:37.
Yes. And that's, I think that was deliberately placed, wasn't it? That
they're saying, there was a nod to actually Stephen King. They supposedly Spielberg wanted Stephen King to write the screenplay. And we don't know if that's true or not. I'm not 100% positive, but that 237 was supposed to be absolutely deliberate.
A nod to The Shining. Yes. And there's another nod to The Shining, whether intentional or not, and that is that the plot of the film is about these ghosts wanting Carol Ann. They want to get her energy, take her over to the other side. And that's essentially what the hotel wants in The Shining. Is it wants Danny and wants to bring him over. So
she's got the shinnin'.
Good point.
And then we know that Stephen King is basing that idea on The Haunting of Hill House, or Shirley Jackson's book, The Haunting. Or I think it's The Haunting of Hill House is the book and The Haunting is the movie. But that concept that the powerful sort of psychical life force energy things on this side are attractive to certain negative forces on the other side. And we'll talk about the other side in a minute. So.
Right. But what I was going to say about Carol Ann was stuff like "they're here." How much impact did that phrase have?
A good bit.
They're here. That was a great line. And, calling them TV people sort of almost like diffuses
I think that's exactly what a 5-year-old, how they would conceptualize of what was happening. Someone in the TV, living in the TV.
And when the mother was like, "Do you see them?" And she's like, "No, do you?"
Yeah.
It was really, I loved it. I mean, I loved her dialogue.
She talked.
Can we have a goldfish now?
She talked like my daughter Sophie when she was that age. Several things she said are like, if not exactly 90% the same words that my daughter used at that age. So it's a lot. It's very realistic. It's good. It's an excellent script. I mean, there's. And
I think this is a good segue to say that at this point, after the tornado scene and the scene with the tree and the little boy, as you were saying, that was really a way to divert attention away from the little girl, so that she could be stolen, transported into their world. And it's basically through the cupboard, isn't it? It's through the
closet,
the closet, as you would say.
I think the British call it a biscuit or something.
Right? Exactly, a cookie.
But you're right. They it takes her and all the furniture and like, but she's the only thing that actually goes through. Like all the toys and stuff don't get sucked through, but somehow she is in the clothes she's wearing, so she doesn't go through naked. But there is some really interesting symbolism because I mean I don't want to spoil it we'll talk about that when we get to it in the plot.
Well, here's a question for two people who have watched this movie multiple times. Is she actually inside of the television? I know that the parents and family are communicating with her through the television, but is she in the television? No, just her voice. She's
in the other plane.
Exactly. You know? She's in the other plane. There's an entrance into the other plane in the closet, and there's an exit in the ceiling of the living room. And the TV is a place where she can speak through the audio. They're like her voice signals coming out, but she's not in the TV.
When they're whispering,
say that like it makes sense.
Well, when they're that scene where they're whispering, and you have to turn your TV up to 100 to hear it. Mm-hmm. What they're saying is that a station that is lacking a signal is free to pick up other signals.
Okay.
So it's basically picking up, Carol Ann, because it's a vacuum of signal.
Can I just say, this is something you won't experience today, but in the 1970s, and this was 82, this would have still been going on. We lived right by Highway 41, which runs like from, I don't know, Detroit to Florida. It's a long road. I don't know if it goes to Detroit or Chicago. Anyway, it's a long road. But truckers would come down because I-75 wasn't finished. This is not really important for the story, except that 18-wheelers were going by the house all the time because they had to in order to get to where they were going. Mm-hmm. And back then, CB radios were everywhere. And when a CB radio had a booster on it, we would get the voice from the CB on our television while we're watching shows. Wow. Like it would just suddenly cut in and you would suddenly hear, truckers talking to each other
and in the middle of the crap out of you.
It would freak you out if it was in the middle of the night. Like if it's late and you're up watching, let's say hypothetically, you're watching the Twilight Zone, you're supposed to be in bed and you're sneaking in and you're watching the Twilight Zone, you're really close to the TV and you got the volume down low so your parents don't hear you. And then suddenly at about 40 times louder than the regular TV signal, some trucker's telling you about a Smoky down the road. It's disconcerting. So
it is.
Little girl is now stuck in the television.
So I love this because this is like one of those things I think around the world of how this film has had an influence is they don't know what to do because you can't go to the phone book and call Ghostbusters. That hasn't happened yet. So they go to a university and get the parapsychology department to come take a look. And I love that because in many ways, the parapsychologists in this film are almost identical to the parapsychologists at the time who would have been looking into this kind of thing. This would be in the age of William Roll and that sort of character. And even Dr. Lesh is leading this team, and she says at one point, there's no degree in parapsychology. I'm just a psychologist, and so
and people have kind of forgotten that, I think.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah. I mean, I think this film had an influence on that. I think people, and we'll talk about how this sort of came to be, but the stuff they're talking about here it's why paranormal researchers prefer, we love poltergeist cases because something's happening. It's not some person waking up having a one-time vision and it goes away. It's like there's recurrent
multiple people.
It's in The Exorcist, there's that moment when Karras says, why don't you, loose your bonds yourself, and the demon says, that would be a vulgar display.
Much too blatant display of vulgar.
I think that's what most of the time when you want to see something paranormal, you want the vulgar display, and so we have
something
all these
overt.
reasons. Yeah,
not these subtle things,
and there's a lot of can be measured.
There's a lot of overt activity in this.
There is, and it's way more than it's what anybody who's investigating this stuff. This is what they would want to see, and you don't want to be sucked into another dimension, but
Well, wasn't that speech great though? Before they opened the door about how the match
moved all the way across the floor, little truck.
And
7 hours.
And wasn't
Yes.
the opening of the door almost a complete mirror to when she opened the door in The Exorcist for the doctors?
Yes.
It was an absolute mirror of that. And so I found that to be an interesting sort of callback.
But I think that it's interesting that with the researcher talking about the little toy moving across the floor over the course of 7 hours, I think that's the kind of thing that a lot of people who get into this today, just in an amateur sense, paranormal investigators, would find that to be proof. That would find that to be fascinating.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, that's
activity.
about the level of what we would expect. As good evidence would be that 7-hour time lapse, slowly showing something moving. There was a few years ago. There was I think it was an Egyptian statue that would slowly rotate on the glass plate overnight.
Yes.
And it turned out to be because of vibrations.
But
But
there's a wedding dress too, I think, that would dance in its little glass case.
Nice.
And it's a similar thing with just vibrations from people walking past.
Almost all the activity in room 401 up at the Stanley is based on vibrations.
I'm going to hold back a whole bunch of vibration jokes now.
Depending on what the people in that room had to eat, I guess, is where you're going with that. I did find a lot of what the parapsychologists did and what the equipment they used and the sort of the observations they were making to be almost a blueprint for what paranormal investigation became.
I think really influenced that.
So,
area.
here we have this series called Based on a True Story, where we're basically talking about art imitating life. And this, I think, is really an issue of life imitating art.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. And I think there's a strong case to be made for that.
And we can talk a bit more about that later too, but we should probably keep moving along. I don't know how long we've been talking, and
we're having fun with this one.
So, Tobe Hooper, horror director, best known probably for the Chainsaw Massacre, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and this film is so different from that. But he was working with a big budget here. Better cameras, better sound, better everything. But this next sequence that happens is with, I think it's Marty, the other paranormal investigator, who goes to the kitchen to get a snack, and just there's some weirdness here, but this is all about gross out. But he reaches into the fridge and just pulls out a steak. There's no wrapper or anything. It's very
who would do that?
Well, when he pulls it out, if you watch it now, it looks like a dog toy. Is what it looks like until he puts it on the counter. But what's really gross, though, if you want to get down to it, is a friggin' stranger going into your kitchen and rummaging through your refrigerator.
A lot of the horror in this film is about strangers eating their food, isn't it?
Yeah. Dude, it's not your house.
Yeah, really.
Anyway,
taking advantage of that, but
why would you put the steak straight down on the counter? It's all. Marty has issues. Is all I'm saying. Marty has a lot of issues.
Well, then he never comes back to after
he has
that experience. Then he
well, nobody really knew about salmonella then.
That happened so quickly. Yeah.
Between the chicken wings, the maggots, his face falling off, there's a lot of reasons why Marty should probably just stay away. That's
Marty will not be returning.
A fun little thing too, that when his face is torn off or he tears his own face off in the bathroom, that's supposedly Spielberg's hands, right, doing the tearing off. And
that's actually common in Dario Argento. When there's a murderer, they always show just the hands. It's almost always Dario Argento doing the killing, himself.
I thought you were going
cameo.
somewhere else. But it's very common when someone's face gets torn off, it's usually Steven Spielberg.
No. But did you, in addition to him pulling out a steak from a stranger's fridge, putting it on the counter, and all the other stuff that happens, after all that, after he rips his face off, he's eaten maggots, he's seen rotten stuff, all this stuff, he walks back into the other room and doesn't mention it to anybody.
It never came up. It never came up.
Then he just leaves.
I did love the inchworm action of the steak, though. When I was young, that was awesome.
I remember, more than I remember watching this movie at the time, I remember all of my friends at school talking about that scene. I mean, it was absolutely a talk about gross out your friends. You won't believe this. It's a Fangoria moment is what it is.
It is. And not long after that, I don't know if you remember that Lou Reed put out a song called No Money Down, where it's basically him, but it's a robot, but it's him. And the entire video is him tearing his face off.
I do not remember that.
In here,
I haven't seen that. I'm a big Lou Reed fan, but I haven't seen that.
Yeah, and I'm positive that it was inspired from that scene.
I was going to try out some Lou Reed music, and a guy was supposed to bring me his album, but I'm still waiting for the man. So,
yeah.
So
take a walk on the wild side.
I will.
It's the only way to find it. And Karen made an interesting observation. It's like he rips off his face, and then there's like that, and then his face is back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
And Karen muttered, "Didn't improve his skin any."
No, oh, that's sad.
Oh yeah, he had a little
scarring
going there. Yeah,
it's time for them to ditch Marty because he's rotten and replace him with Tangina.
Yeah, which I said to Matt too, sounds like another early name for the world, like a Gondwana land or Tangina. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Tangina. Yeah, It's a very interesting name. I don't know if
did they say her name?
As far as I know, I just read it in the script. Yeah,
they did not. Okay. It's the only time you see her name is in the credits.
Yeah,
it's not.
I mean credits. I don't know why I said script. I've never read the script. So that's Zelda Rubinstein. So or Stein or Steen. I'm not sure.
I think it's Steen. But she was awesome. She really was a great character. I think
she has an amazing presence. I mean, such a tiny woman, but she, I think, really is one of the best actors in the film and so memorable.
Do you get the impression that Chip that Chip Coffey bases his like whole persona on her though?
That's so funny you should say that, because we were actually talking about
James Van Praagh
and some of the things that she said we've heard him say versions of.
I think the impact of this movie can't be overstated on the actual paranormal field.
Yeah, well, we watched an interview with her where she was talking about this movie, and she said that she was a medium. She was a small masquerading. She was a small masquerading as a medium. And when we saw James Van Praagh, he said he was a small medium at large. And it just seems like, he might have taken from her on that, but who wouldn't? She's a great,
very charismatic.
Great source material there.
I think just about everything she said was quotable.
Oh, Kathleen, my wife, she's got them all. Like she's got the whole thing down. Her mom called and said something about they were talking about watching the film, and her mom was like saying like it was almost like her mom was wondering if she was scared of the film or whatever. And then so Kathleen just started quoting the film to assure her mom that it was like all okay. But the thing she quoted was the whole scene about, there's something here strong enough to punch a hole in your world and take Carol. And her mom's like, what are you saying? What's going on? I love you, Dinah. So,
but she really, I think that this part of the movie is so important because she's explaining what's going on. I mean, this whole time, all of this, crazy activity has been taking place.
She's a little ball of exposition is what she is.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the sound that Karen made when Tangina says, "I am addressing the living," that outburst of laughter was
it's a good line.
It
really shows shows up the father as well, because he's testing her and, trying to send a message to her telepathically, and he's being a smart ass, and she's onto him, so
puts him in his place.
This movie would not have been as good if they had gotten a big, well-known cast. I think this movie benefited greatly by having great actors who are not well-known and who consequently come across as real people. So
I was disappointed in the remake, the 2015 remake, and I could just stop right there. I was disappointed, but the thing is the Tangina that they had in that one was just some middle-aged Irish guy. And it seemed to me that they were trying to play off of the most haunted aspect there. And he just did not pull it off. It didn't carry it at all, but nobody in the movie did really, except for maybe the pig toy was about the only carried it off. But anyway,
we should I think the rescue scene reminds me again of some of where this comes from, and we want to get to. We're almost done with the film, the main part of it here. So, but I am having a hard time not talking about the influences that made this film happen. So,
right.
But let's get into the rescue, because I want to say that although this is that vulgar paranormal that we never see in real life, it has a strong internal logic. So they test things. It's like a real science-y kind of approach to how they actually go about rescuing. And even though there's all this spiritualism stuff happening, they're still using very practical, throwing the tennis balls through, throwing the rope through. So, I mean, there's a good, it's not just pulling stuff out of his butt. It's got an internal logic to it, which I like a lot.
I think it's interesting too, how she hasn't, Tangina hasn't seen anything like this in her entire career. Yeah, this is the worst she's ever seen, and she acknowledges that. And yet, she had a plan, and let's go get your daughter, whatever she says. But it's I mean, you really have to suspend belief by this point, though. I mean, certainly earlier on, there are a lot of things that could potentially happen, and could, strange things that could happen. But by this point, it's really over the top.
It is. It is
totally.
It is again, like the Close Encounters. Close Encounters is way over the top. This never happens in UFO stuff. Is where but they show up. You can see them. There they are, right there. They're grabbing people. They're returning people.
It's what we want. Steven Spielberg's giving us what we wish we could have.
He's giving us the paranormal, the UFO, all that. He just needs to do a Bigfoot movie now. So it's all. He's got all this stuff down. I mean, like he's so. But yeah, so the rescue scene is fantastic. I think and how like birth, only it's not just the little girl being reborn. She's gone over to the other side, and now the mother goes through and brings her back. They come through this sort of paranormal electrical vagina thing, and then they fall onto the floor covered in goo. I mean, like it's like
amniotic
birth.
Fluid kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. So,
but it is interesting that you should say it's the ectoplasm. And I guess after we've talked about the movie, we can talk about just the conflating of phenomena which seems to take place in the movie.
Yeah, because it really does.
So then Tangina tells us that this house is clean. And so I guess we just roll credits.
I love the way she does that too, and she kind of brushes her hair.
She fixes her hair.
She's on film.
Yeah.
And that is hilarious, because the house is as clean as her hair is fixed.
Yeah, exactly.
When you get down to
it's not over. Yeah.
But we really feel it's over. They're packing up, and it's just kind of this sort of resolution, and
you could have totally ended the film at that point. You really could have.
Yeah. It was just this huge, and we're all feeling safe, and we find out that the daughter's been a bit of a whore.
Not Carol Ann.
No, not Carol Ann. The older daughter. Going to hotel rooms and stuff.
More of that comedy too.
I mean, it's everyday life that they're injecting in a way that makes us all relate.
Yeah, my wife just pointed this out to me too. This is what Matt's talking about, is as they're preparing to leave, they're not even going to spend the night in the house. They say they're going to go to a local motel. The mom names the motel.
The Motel 7 on I-70.
It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
And then the mother's like, what? And then the girl
like,
points out,
are you going to leave your hair like that? Yeah.
That have appeared from the stress of everything that's taken place, and just diverts her attention. And
it's a good moment. I mean,
it's another one of those disarming bits of humor, and you think, everything's okay. The movie's about to come to an end. They're going to get in the vehicle and leave, and that's it.
This was the first time watching it when it really struck me, though, that the dad says, "I'll be home early. We're not spending the night here." But yet the mom is going to go take a bath, and she sends the kids to bed in their pajamas, which is like,
because he was just like, if the kids want to, crash for a little bit, that's fine.
I do think, that was little.
This is the first time. I'm looking at I'm 52 now, and I just now caught on to that was a little weird. So sorry.
Well, right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I always kind of thought, after all that's going on,
51.
Would you
I don't know how old
children,
I am.
Would you leave your children alone in any room in that house after what had just gone on, and you're so close to
and
getting
dye
out.
your hair and have a relaxing bath. Yeah, that wouldn't
No,
be
I would
happening.
not.
Staying
I don't
with the
have any
children.
hair, but I would not. So.
Well, exactly.
dye your beard, but yeah, it was
that wasn't very believable.
Yeah, that was.
But
that
we
was
do need to take care of Chekhov's clown, so this has to happen. So
that's true. That's true. Yeah, and that was a kind of a very pivotal scene, or memorable scene for a lot of us too, because we are all creeped out by the clown, and to have that clown actually pay off, freaked us out, as kids.
And wasn't there a story associated with that, where the I think the arm
clown malfunction
actually was starting,
choking,
to choke him,
yeah,
and that Spielberg saved the kid. So
yeah,
I think Spielberg set that up so he could be a hero.
I just hope. I mean, I'm glad the kid's okay. So, in fact, that he's the only one of those kids that's still around. So, yeah.
Only surviving son. And I think he's finally grown into his teeth.
Don't even start. It's like a poor kid, like Nosferatu over there. So, yeah. Anyway, so ultimately, it turns out the house is not clean. There's a little bit more to happen, and we have to get the big reveal.
A lot more to happen.
Yeah, we have to get the big reveal as well for why all this stuff's going on. So,
right.
You want to talk us through that, Matt or Karen?
Well, yeah. I mean, we get that. As he's going to talk to his boss and everything. It actually happens a little earlier in the movie, just by a little bit. The boss takes him up on the hill to say, how's this for a bay window and everything? And he's like, well, it's fine if you're up here, but if you're down there looking up here, it's not so great. He's like, well, this is yours. And then he turns around, and for the first time we see the cemetery behind him. And he's like, well, there's not a lot of room here for a hot tub. And then he's like, oh no, we've just moved the bodies. We've done it before. Oh yeah, really? Where? Well, right down there in phase 1, where you're living.
Yeah. Which, by the way, he makes a little comment about it's not like it's an Indian burial ground, right?
Right.
And which I think is important. So I want to come back to that. But
yes, that is an interesting comment. But and then we find out that he didn't move the bodies; he just moved the headstones.
Yeah.
And that's why there's all these people there. Now it's interesting because when you get into Poltergeist 2, that's still not quite what's going on.
Yeah, no, they changed the story for Poltergeist 2. That's a
right. But there is some important aspects of Poltergeist 2 that help explain Poltergeist 1. Yeah, and we don't know which is canon, I guess, is the thing. But it's kind of like with The Exorcist. You don't know it's Pazuzu if you know nothing about Pazuzu. But in Exorcist 2, they tell you all about Pazuzu, even though Exorcist 2 really goes off the rails. Yeah. And I think this one is a little similar. That you get to know more about Cain, the minister that causes the entire problem.
Creepy.
But it's not so much about a cemetery as him being a doomsday, preacher, trying to keep all these people together, to take them to the promised land in a sense. And it's these people he has captured. It's not people that were buried there. And he has them captured in a cavern, like, under the house type of thing. So it goes in weird places there, and you don't really know, okay, which is the truth, because maybe they did just move the headstones and the bodies are there, but are those bodies their souls should be gone anyway?
Yeah. You're right. There's there's consistency questions about the sort of. In fact, the whole scene when they're whispering before all the ghosts come down the stairs, there's a whole thing where they're talking about what might happen to us when we die. And they have some very explicit ideas.
And again, the kid had some great dialogue there when he's like, I got beaten up at school one time and they took my lunch money. What if they got hit by a bus and they're up in Carol Ann's room? They're up there in my room right now waiting for me. And it's like, what if? I remember being 12 going, crap. What if people I don't like die and they're waiting for me,
watching you poop. That's what they do.
Yeah. And then they're going to tell people that I poop, that's horrible as a 12-year-old, but all that's really, interesting stuff. And then they talk about the jewelry coming through. This one's from, the 19th century. And this one is from a few years ago. And that's also kind of the idea about an active graveyard. People from different eras being buried there. And then being swept off. So it gets really confusing, and that's the whole phenomena, because the phenomena in the movie is not poltergeist phenomena.
It's not. No.
So why the name of Poltergeist? Probably because it's not something people were all that familiar with, and they wanted to bring that word out into the public. I'm not really sure.
Yeah,
but,
I mean,
well, there is some activity, a little bit of noisy ghost, violent ghost.
You get apparitions, you get like a lot of weird noises and
movement, things move around.
Movement of things that telekinesis. But that's like, I mean,
you don't get hallucinations. You don't get, the house imploding.
There's nothing centered on a pubescent girl, a 12-year-old, 13-year-old girl or something like that. Instead, it's around a 5-year-old girl.
Yeah.
So for a completely different reason. You're not going off the energy of this person going through puberty. It's
like a bait and switch is what it really is. Like you think it's going to be a movie about poltergeist. But I mean, the commercials would have, made it clear this is something a little different. It's a really interesting choice of titles. Yeah. And even when they talk about poltergeist activity, they never do. Every paranormal TV show will say poltergeist, which is German for noisy ghost. And then, they always tell you that. And then they'll talk about the phenomena. And this sort of starts out with that and then goes in a completely different direction. So
into more of a haunting, and you even have demonic and satanic activity. And
well, they say it very clearly in the movie that, a poltergeist centers around a person and usually doesn't last all that long. And a haunting centers around a location, a place. Yeah. This was centered around a place.
Yeah.
And that's, that's the place
and
where that
only
happened.
That house too.
Yep.
Not the surrounding houses.
And I guess it's because that's where Carol Ann lived, and maybe it did surround the person.
I'm of the opinion that this is because, and I don't think this was an accident. I think that the writers specifically state Carol Ann was born, like she was conceived there. She was the first person in the neighborhood born there. So like she was a new life, given creation there, basically.
I think I missed that. So
yeah, it was during the same time they did the speech about the at the top of the hill with the next to the giant cemetery. He mentions that Carol Ann was born there, like she was the first. And they don't say she was the first one, but I think that's what we're supposed to understand. So she became like a beacon.
That's right. He did say that.
Yeah.
I missed it, but we could have been talking over it.
Yeah. I mean, that's just a theory. It could just be that they made it up and it didn't matter. It's a made up story. But since everything else seems to have some logic or consistency to it, I think that is probably part of it. And I don't think they talked about that in the second movie either, but for some reason, like in the second movie, it's more about like she has a lot of energy and the old preacher guy wants to have her to use her as a tool, right?
Yep.
And wasn't he one of the best bad guys ever?
Yeah, bless his heart. He was dying of cancer.
Yeah.
So he looked like a walking skeleton, but that wasn't necessarily
makeup. Yeah, he was in bad shape, but oh my Lord, was he was one of the creepiest. I mean, he was better than Jason, Freddy, all those guys.
Haven't I seen you somewhere before? Could be. I like to travel. I
like to get around. Yeah.
It's like, oh my Lordy. Yeah. I wish the whole movie was as good as he was, because the movie's got some problems, but man.
But I guess we should close off on the plot. Basically this is the second attempt.
House.
This house
this is the second this creature, the beast's second attempts to try and get the little girl back, I mean some amazing activity there too, with the mother falling into the unfilled swimming pool. There's a lot of kind of muddy water in there, and then you start to see the tombstones come out of the ground, and you start to see
caskets. Yeah.
I thought it was headstones as well.
I think there were a few here and there, but more than anything else, those caskets were rocketing out of the earth.
Okay. Yeah. But to see that the skeletons too, and then to find out that they actually did use real skeletons from India. They were not plastic ones, so that's pretty creepy to see her. And I think they didn't tell her about that either, did they?
Yeah, that's
after allegedly. So
yeah. Pretty gross.
It's another kind of Hitchcock-like thing.
Yeah, or Billy Friedkin
on her.
Yeah, definitely a creepy thing to happen. I mean, you're swimming with actual skeletons is pretty weird. But yeah, and then that great scene where she's trying to run down the hallway to the room, and the hallway stretches out. That's one of the I
like that.
best
I thought that was clever
illustrations.
That's like
a
dream thing come to life, is what that is.
Yes.
Like
absolutely, yes. I've had things like that where I'm trying to run and I just can't run. I can't move and feel stuck, and that really evoked that sense.
And my coupon's about to expire and I can't get to the register. It's no.
Well, and it's interesting. You got to see what because you're really kind of led to believe that the neighbors are complete jerks, and you get to find out at that point that they actually are, because they help her out of the pool, and she's like, "Come help," and they're like,
something.
"I'm out." Yeah. It's a bit much. It's a bit much.
So yeah. No thanks.
So ultimately,
but I think
the house does this amazing thing. I love this. It's like such a beautiful Spielbergian style ILM effect of the house folding in on itself and collapsing into a ball of light. Oh, it's so good.
If I had a nickel for every time that's happened to me, I wouldn't have a nickel. It was that when I was watching it, because so much of the movie blew me away at 12 years old, that did not.
Oh, really?
I watched that and I was like, what? The house ate itself?
Yeah.
What? That was kind of that was lame
to see, because he was standing there and of course he had everyone else from the surrounding. Yeah, I mean, that he finally understood what was going on in the house. And
he had it coming. And one thing I never ever noticed, and I don't know why I never noticed it, but last night Karen pointed it out when Dana showed back up and she does that scream of what's happening. And that always just hit me so hard when she would do that scream, because it was very intense for doing that scream. I never noticed the hickey on her neck.
Thanks, high def.
Didn't stay at the hotel that night. Yeah, or at least when they were with their family.
not that one. But
and that's basically what happens. They
go back to the hotel.
Car. And I wish she'd just get in the friggin' car too, because she's just standing there screaming. It's like, get in the car and leave. And
and then of course, the first thing he does, he checks his back pockets for his car keys. Really?
That's interesting. Yeah.
Your back pockets? Why are you gonna check your? And he's like, it's like, dude, that's not where you keep your car keys. I know that about you. But but to me, the best scene ever is when they all get into the hotel room and the TV gets shoved out on the balcony.
Yeah,
very
clearly the TV's fault, right?
Yeah. I loved that when I saw it for the first time.
No, it's very funny. I don't know why
Americans watch too much TV. See, this is what happens. This is the moral of the story.
Is The Howling 82 as well? Because the ending of The Howling is like there's like that sort of stinger ending with the hamburger at we make it rare.
Yeah,
it just that sort of comedy, like little happy, little funny stinger at the end is a really, really nice touch, I think.
Yeah. Well, they did that with the Hulk. Did that with the Hulk with Eric Bana, I think it was in South America or whatever.
Oh yeah, Don't Make Me Angry.
Yeah. And then
we go to Matt. That's
Don't Make Me Angry. But then you got was it Edward Norton that said "Don't Make Me Hungry"?
But I think we're running out of time.
Yeah,
we should probably talk a little bit about the curse and also talk about the true stories behind the movie, or not.
So let's go with. I mean, this is local to Denver. Let's go with Cheeseman Park first, because.
Do you want to talk about the curse first?
Well, we can talk about the curse if you want to.
It's just before we get into the true stories is all I thought.
Yeah, we did just talk about curses. So if you'd like to learn more about curses, you can go check out our episode about curses. So
indeed, our live episode of Monster Talk.
Yes.
So I mean, the curse, as I understand it anyway, is that a number of people who were in that first movie, associated with the first movie, that they died pretty soon thereafter. I mean, it seems like it was
spread out a little bit. Really. Yeah, there was some real tragedies around there.
And the curse, I think, went over the 3 films rather than just the first one, because Carol Ann actually didn't die until the 3rd film.
Right.
So she died just after it, or
during filming, I believe.
During filming.
During filming, and that was tragic. I'm not sure what did she have some kind of stomach?
She was misdiagnosed. I think they thought she had Crohn's disease, or I believe that's right. But what she actually had was a bowel obstruction, and it went bad.
And she was 12.
Yeah. So
I mean, you can see she was so swollen, and it was so sad. to see her go through that. But yeah, you could tell she was just in some kind of septic shock. You know, it was
and then there was
horrible.
the older sister, and apparently she was
murdered.
She was strangled by an ex-boyfriend. I think on the driveway of her home in Hollywood, and then she died a couple of days later after that.
Yep.
So more tragedy. And who else?
The medicine man in the second movie died, and I can't remember his name, but the Native American medicine man in the second movie, he had passed away. And then of course you have the
preacher.
You have Kane, the preacher, who died of cancer during the filming of the second one. And then, of course, I don't believe Tangina is around anymore, but I don't know if they want to include her in that curse as well.
Well, but, a lot of people who collect curses just keep tacking on people as they die.
Yes, right? I think so. Exactly. That's what happens.
And I think that's exactly.
Eventually, we're all going to be killed by the curse of the Titanic, and it's going to be tragic. So,
which is very connected to the curse of King Tut.
As for the true stories behind the movie, Cheeseman Park. Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing is that
this story.
That line of screaming out, you moved the headstones, but you left the bodies. You didn't move the bodies. That whole line does make many people think about Cheeseman Park. Now, the thing is Cheeseman Park is not the only place that this has happened, but it is one of the more famous areas that it happened. And it's interesting because the stories you hear about Cheeseman Park are mostly false. Yes, the bodies are still there. I'll share my screen here just for a moment to look at some of these things. Give me just a second. I want to make sure I have the correct screen up. So I can...
But how well would the Cheeseman Park story have been known at the time of?
And that's a great question.
Poltergeist?
I don't know how well. Can you guys see that? Okay, see that there's a skeleton in the ground. Now,
I do.
The story is that the contractor who got the job to move the bodies would just take a few bones and throw them in a casket here and a few bones and throw them in a casket there. This is pretty much a full skeleton. And the things that have been found there have all pretty much been connected to full skeletons. So that story about how, the bones were it was like willy-nilly, somebody running across the cemetery, just throwing bones around, is not accurate. Undertaker McGovern was kind of overseeing the whole job of moving the bodies. And there was a contractor. In fact, I can jump right here to this newspaper article that was March 19th, 1893. And this is when everything was kind of exposed on what was going on. And here's the thing. This newspaper article is what people look at when they want to tell the story of what happened at Cheeseman Park. But here's the problem. Fake news happened then as well. This story was heavily politically motivated. There were two camps, and they were split by the political parties. One of them did not believe that the body should be moved and that it was going to expose Denver to all of these horrible diseases and everything else, because tuberculosis and various other things were killing people that were getting buried there. And they didn't feel that pulling these bodies up was a good idea. So they thought, just leave it alone, leave it the way it is. And then there was the other camp who believed that, yes, people want to be able to come and visit their loved ones and everything. So move the bodies properly and do it this way. Well, the thing is there was a lot of reasons. There was a lot of reasons why the bodies couldn't be moved the way they needed to be. There was a shortage of caskets. The bodies, as I go back to this original picture here, that is about 1.5 feet deep. These bodies were not buried very deeply. And so the problem is the caskets, because the ground is a lot more acidic at that level, caskets had been eaten away. All of their clothes and everything had been eaten away, their flesh. They were pretty much skeletons at this point, and they were falling apart. So all new caskets had to be, just I'll say coffins, the pine coffins had to be used to move these people. And there was a shortage because there were other people that needed these coffins because of a huge mining accident in, I believe it was in Arizona. And we had to ship out a bunch of coffins out there. Well, the bottom line is the stories about how horrible this was were all known by the government in power at the time, because they were the ones telling McGovern to say, yeah, if you're out of adult size coffins, use children's ones and just break the bodies in half and do what you have to do. So all these kind of horrible things were happening, but it was at the direction of the government. They're blaming the contractors in the story. They're saying, oh, the contractors did it. Cap Smith and McGilvray, they're the bad guys. But no, they were following orders just to get this done. But as soon as the newspaper exposed it, the whole thing became, that's it, seal it up. We're not moving any more bodies. We're done. We're turning it into a park, and that's it. So now all of the houses around there and the park itself and the Botanic Gardens all have plenty of bodies still there underneath it, probably up to 5,000 bodies still there.
Wow. But it just seems like outside of that line in the closing minutes of the film, it doesn't seem like there's any other.
There's no other connection. There's no other connection. And the thing is I can show you here. This is when I actually worked with the forensic team down there on some of the bodies that were unearthed.
You were joined by Wilford Brimley?
Yes. I was explaining to him how you cannot make a good bowl of oatmeal.
And watch Clark and watch him cloche.
But as you can see right here, this is pretty much a full skeleton that we were reassembling.
You need a longer table.
Yeah. So, and there were several that we were reassembling. And so it wasn't exactly the way the newspapers described it. But yes, there is no other thing. I mean, now a lot of houses around that area claim to be haunted. But when you consider that with the bodies being buried so shallowly in this ground and it being bentonite, which does move around a lot when it's wet. So you've got these bodies sort of moving around when it gets wet and everything. So suddenly these bodies are now outside the boundaries of the cemetery and they're underneath a lot of the houses that are around the park. And one day, a woman sitting there and her dog comes running up with a pelvis in its mouth. You can suddenly start thinking your house is haunted because now you're wondering what the hell happened here. Why do I have dead bodies here? My house must be haunted.
Yeah.
So you could start believing that, sure, but what came first? Poltergeist or, obviously Cheeseman Park came first in that sense, but it being reported the way it is these days hasn't happened. The last 20 years is when that's been reported a lot more, is what I'm trying to say.
I think so when they wrote this movie, much in the same way I think Steven Spielberg is really plugged into UFO lore around the script for Close Encounters. It feels like the writers, and I think Hooper helped out here too, they were really plugged into paranormal lore because a lot of the talk in the film about the other side and guiding to the light feels like it's coming straight out of Hans Holzer. He always liked to work with mediums. I was thinking about
small mediums.
He worked with several mediums over the course of his career, and one of them was Ethel Myers when they did the Amityville research, and she was responsible for that story that the Amityville case had Indian burial, not an Indian burial ground, but like an Indian place where the Native Americans kept
they're insane
insane people. It's really strange. It's not based in reality at all, but that idea that that having bodies there under the property would cause this sort of paranormal activity, I think comes right out of Hans Holzer's research. And he was all about trying to help the spirits get over to the other side and clearing. And that's clearly the kind of approach that's going on here. And
that's what Tangina wanted. And it's interesting that you should bring up the Native American burial ground, because there aren't very many actual Native American burial grounds, because a lot of Native Americans were nomadic. And so they didn't really have burial grounds. Now, in terms of Cheeseman Park, it was one of the rare Arapaho burial grounds. And that's why the graves were so shallow, is because of the fact that the Native Americans were buried 6 feet down, and they were told, with this agreement to give this land to the city of Denver, that they could not bury anybody that would disturb the Native American bodies. So that meant 3 feet down is all the deeper they could go. So that does have an impact, but we have never seen any Native American claims in terms of hauntings there. It's all about the fact that everything else that went wrong with this place is, I think, where the hauntings come from. So it is interesting that they would bring that up in the movie, but that's such a trope that how could they avoid using it?
And so the other story that Matt and I came across, and like I think you came across this as well, was the story of the Popper ghost.
The Popper ghost, the Herman
Popper,
family.
That was
the ghost.
I actually was not familiar with this. This was
me neither.
No, I wasn't either. Yeah,
I'm going to say just up front that I had heard that there was another story about an area in Van Nuys, California, that had both the cemetery not being moved properly and poltergeist activity that had actually been caught on camera, which I'll see if I can dig up some of that footage, because it is creepy. But I had heard that was the story, but then they come to find out that had nothing to do with inspiration for poltergeist. So this Popper thing I had not heard of before.
It's a 1950s poltergeist case that was
1958.
Yeah, 1958, which also included some recordings of activity. And it sounded like a very typical poltergeist case to me. But I don't know much about it. So
it was about the Herman family, and apparently there were two teenage
with two
kids
R's
involved.
and two N's. That's very specific.
Yes,
Herman.
yeah.
They did not want to be confused with Pee Wee Herman.
Yeah.
Who does? So there was a 12-year-old boy and there was a 13-year-old girl as well. But the story basically was I think the father was away. He was a pilot, and the family just started experiencing activity, a very specific form of activity where bottles in the house would explode, or the lids, the caps would come off the bottles, whether it was medicine bottles or soda bottles, just any bottles in the house, throughout the house, in the basement, in the refrigerator, just everywhere were popping, hence the name, the Popper ghost. And it seems to me, it makes me think of the Enfield poltergeist a little bit, in that there was a research group who got involved and looked into this, and a lot of the activity wasn't happening when they watched the sun.
When they were engaging with the children.
Yeah, when they were being observed, suddenly the activity wasn't taking place.
Which also sounds like the Gyra ghost. It also sounds like Rolando.
The Columbus period.
Yeah, and the Gyra ghost predating all of these, going back to the 1920s in Australia. But certainly the father was called back from whatever exotic location that he was in at the time, and would have cause to be with the family. So it sounded a little bit like the Enfield poltergeist, where there was no father present, and it seemed like a cry for help or a call for attention from the young girls. So it seems like a similar kind of thing here. And I think at some point the boy was blamed for the activity, and because he was interested in science, and perhaps he was just making these experiments around the house. And then there was some kind of proof that he was brushing his teeth at the time that bottles were exploding, and therefore it couldn't be attributed to him, which
this was before either Mentos or Diet Coke had been invented as well. So,
but
and I was thinking about
was
that too.
Alka-Seltzer existed.
Absolutely, but I think that people are tying that story, that case, to this after the fact. I think it's a kind of post-diction.
One not true story, but one real piece of fiction that definitely influenced this film, or seems like it must have, is the Richard Matheson story "Little Girl Lost," which was made into a Twilight Zone episode.
And people need to go and see that, because it's really stunning to see the similarities when you
watch
that.
Yeah, it's quite a bit. It's a really weird, it sounds strange. It's a weird Twilight Zone episode. I mean, it is unusual in that its approach is so clinical and scientific for something that's so out there. Matheson is such a great writer, and he's written so many important works, and he's written a lot about this kind of stuff. His the Haunting of Hell House novel and the movie based on that is very much a case of super scary ghost activity in a scary house, and scientific investigators go to find out what's going on. And I think so. He's had he had an amazing career, and recommend that episode for sure. I haven't never read the short story it's based on, but apparently it's based on a real event where he and his wife were up. They heard their daughter screaming for help, and they went to find her, and they couldn't find her. And ultimately, it turned out she had fell out of the bed and rolled under it. And so that was all that had happened. But they could hear her, but they couldn't see her. And for just a few minutes, it was like absolutely terrifying. What's going on? And that's literally what happens in the film here. Is the girl's gone, but they can hear her screaming, but they can't get to her. And as a parent, again, I thought you don't know what fear is until you have kids.
Absolutely.
So.
Totally.
But yeah, I think all in all, it really does seem like, as Matt was saying, that it's a matter of this movie influencing a lot of other theory and other movies and beliefs, rather than
investigators.
Yes. And I think one thing that we haven't raised yet, Matt had raised as we were watching the movie, when you have the TV screen and the white noise, did this possibly influence EVP theory about electronic voice phenomena as well, being able to communicate with recorders or through computers or televisions or other pieces of equipment? Did that somehow influence the modern theory and the way that affects ghost hunting?
Yeah, I know we had, Rod Ive and all those guys doing the was it communication stuff?
Yeah.
But the thing
is deep cut as well. So
I think this really brought it into a I love those deep cuts. I think this really brought it into the kind of the mainstream. So many modern day paranormal investigators are all influenced by what they see in movies and on TV. And they don't do any actual research. Yeah.
Frank Sumption, the inventor of the Frank's box, who's no longer with us, but he did talk about how, you can use a radio, but you could also use television.
You could use a babbling brook. Anything that created white noise.
He would hear voices even through a tap dripping or water running. Noise outside. So I think
that's how his wife would call him to dinner. As a matter of fact, was through running water.
He believed,
that he believed, yes. But to go back to this Popper the Poltergeist really quickly, there is a book out called Popper the Poltergeist, the first haunting shown on TV. So supposedly that this was shown, a lot of this phenomenon was shown on TV, and it was, America was kind of locked onto it. It's odd because I never heard of it before. So how locked was America on it? And number two, I can't find a clip of any of this so-called footage anywhere.
It wasn't 1958. I just don't think that was the case. I think it's something that someone's come across and they've linked it to Poltergeist.
Well, the thing is, why can't I find any footage? Supposedly it was shown on television.
Well,
the footage exists.
They didn't have it. Recordings. There's in the early days, there's a lot of things that are missing. So I think famously the BBC would record over their VHS stuff because it was so expensive to have the tape. So we've lost so many episodes of classic TV shows that were super popular, but there's no record of it except for photos and stills and occasional audio recordings. Like
I would think
Ernie Kovacs stuff is mostly missing.
I find that to be convenient in this situation because if there was footage of something that was earth shattering that could show that there was life after death, I don't think that it would be so simply, we don't have enough space, we got to record over it. It just feels to me to be convenient. This isn't good footage in the first place. This footage isn't that great. Let's just record over it. Seems more logical to me than it actually.
I don't know enough about what was allegedly shown on television. In other words,
I think, and it was just
dishes were smashed, bookshelves toppled over, objects moved. I
think it's the reference. The reference to reality TV, though, I think is just a modern day tack on. And I just think it's a really obscure case. And at some point, someone has come across this and they've linked it to make Poltergeist seem like it has more of a history to it than it really does.
I just had an interesting idea though. You remember in the movie when Marty goes into the kitchen and he puts the steak on the counter, right?
Yes.
And he also
forget
goes
it.
in. You won't forget that. He also has that chicken wing. And so here he is. He's standing in the kitchen. He's eating a chicken wing. He doesn't live there. Does that make him a poultry guest?
And on that note,
end scene.
Goodbye.
Well, the thing is did you know that I have a connection, unfortunately, to the movie Poltergeist, Night of the Chicken Dead?
Because of course there's a movie about this. Yeah.
Lloyd Kaufman, who we all love from Toxic Avenger, had a movie called Poltergeist, Night of the Chicken Dead. The effects team for that movie also created another movie that Lloyd Kaufman was a part of, and it was part of his production company, called Adam the Amazing Zombie Killer. And unfortunately, I played used car salesman #1 in that movie.
Really?
But so I do have a connection with Poltergeist, and I knew it was going to come up somehow.
That is delightful. That is delightful.
And with that, I think we should close off on this episode. So thank you to everyone for sitting through this
whatever it is we just did was
an episode. Yeah, I mean, this is
a
longer episode.
Do we want to decide on our next dose? We had discussed the possibility of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
And I thought that was what we were going to be going with, and the links between that and other similar films as well.
And the inspiration behind that, there have been
I haven't seen this movie.
Oh, really?
Myself, I have not seen it, so I guess I'm in for a treat, right?
We'll watch the original and not the remake.
Yeah, no. I think it's a treat. I think it is. I mean, no, be kind, because it's an old movie. It was made independent,
These are all old movies.
Well, the thing is Karen, you'll enjoy this one the way you enjoyed The Hills Have Eyes.
Yeah, if you did, then that's probably about right. Yeah. So.
I certainly thought that was a fun one. That was interesting. I mean, these have all been interesting to watch as an adult.
Again, Matt and I, growing up when we did, we would have heard these horror stories about how terrifying and violent this movie is. So now, as a jaded adult, to go back and rewatch it with my kids, it's like, this isn't as horrific as I thought it was. Like, in my head, it had become far more violent and horrific. So yeah.
Well, I think that's a good choice for the next episode.
I love it. Let's do that. So
we should just, again, thank you everyone for watching this.
Absolutely.
And please do check out everything else that we've been doing, our regular episodes of Monster Talk, and also our YouTube series of Monster Talk Live, and Matt's series, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yes, Ask a Paranormal Investigator. Feel free to, if you have a question, contact me and I'll see if I can answer it in an episode. But also pay attention to the Patreon account. If we
buy me a hat, I can't just live off of these $2 bandanas. It's ridiculous.
If you like all the content that we're putting out, if everybody chose to to put in $3 a month on this, we can keep putting out to this content until the cows come home, and that's really what we want to do.
We really appreciate your support,
that means.
And we do spend a lot of time doing research into all of the various shows that we're doing, and we really thank you for that support.
Your support quite literally keeps the lights on, so thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.